Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a little review about the Nikon D7500 camera. So the D7500 has been around for a while now. I think it was released in about 2017, but it's still a popular camera and it's a really good choice for amateurs and enthusiast level photographers. So I got this camera a couple of years ago now as my main camera, and since then I've upgraded to the Nikon Z7 mirrorless camera. But I still use this a lot, particularly for wildlife and fast moving action. And I also use Canon cameras in my day job for my work. So that's where I'm coming from with this camera and how I approach whether it's good or bad. But everyone's going to be coming at it differently. You know, you might be upgrading from a lower Nikon model, or you might be coming from a different system, or you might even want to downgrade from, say, like a larger camera to something that's not necessarily mirrorless but a bit smaller with the crop sensor body. So for that reason, I think everyone's coming at it from a different angle, and I don't want to go through every single feature in detail. There are lots of videos out there that do that. What I want to do is just give you my personal experience, how I use the camera and how I compare it to the other cameras I use, and maybe that'll help you inform your decision if you're looking to buy this camera. So who's this camera for? It's primarily aimed at users within the beginner to enthusiast or prosumer range. Some professionals might use it. In fact, I do know professionals who stick a good lens on this body and use it for weddings or commercial work and get good results out of it. But it's mainly aimed at beginners to enthusiasts, and they're going to get really good results, and it's a really good value camera for those users. It'll do a really wide range of genres, so it'll do anything from portraits to landscapes to wildlife and action stuff. It's a really good all-around camera. It's good for people who are going to be wanting to upgrade from, say, a Nikon 3500 or 5600 or a similar equivalent from a different brand. It's also good for people who don't need full frame. So it does have a crop sensor inside this camera. It's a very good sensor. What that means is that you're not going to get quite as much light into the camera as you would with a full frame, and you'll have slightly less depth of field. But other than that, because of the quality of the sensor, you're still going to get really good results, and it means it's a lot lighter, and some people will really like that aspect of this camera. So let's talk about some of the good things I like about this camera. Number one is the quality, and that's because of the sensor in this camera. It shares the same exact sensor as the Nikon D500, which is the flagship crop sensor model in the Nikon range. It also has the exact same processor as the D500, and because of that you're going to get really high quality images. It's only 20 megapixels, 20.9 megapixels. I say only, that's more than enough. But because of the really good sensor, you're going to get really high quality images out of this. It's got really good colours, it's sharp, and because of the processor it's fast and responsive, so you're going to get some really good images. I also like the high burst rate of this camera. It can take 8 frames a second, which is really good for a camera in this price range. If you set it to the high burst rate mode, you can reel off a real quick burst of images, and the buffer in this camera will store up to 50 images before it has to stop and start processing those. And that's really good for a camera in this price range. It means it's really good for wildlife, bird photography. If you want to take shots of birds in flight, you can track them, use that high burst rate, and with the autofocus on continuous autofocus, you're going to get plenty of good shots there. You might miss 1 or 2, but you're probably going to get 8 out of 10 shots which are good and usable out of that burst. I really like the button layout of Nikon's. I'm kind of biased because they're my main camera that I use in my spare time. Like I said, for my day job, I do use a Canon. I've got used to that layout as well, but I do prefer the Nikon. I'm not keen on the little dial that you get on the back of a Canon. I like how the buttons on the Nikon are laid out. You can just get your thumb and finger to those dials at the front and back. I like the menu system in the Nikons. From a usability point of view, it's really good. It's really good in low light, and that again is down to the processor and sensor in this camera. You often find with crop sensor cameras that they're not particularly good in low light because the full frame sensors will let in more light and capture more light, whereas the crop sensors have just got less sensor space to capture that light. But for a crop sensor, this is really good in low lighting. You can easily go up to ISO 6400 and still get usable images. I really like that this camera's got a button on the side which I can press to change my focus mode. And it might sound odd, but on my Nikon Z7 I can't do that. If I want to change the focus mode on my Z7, I have to press the I button on the back. That gives me a little pop-up menu on the screen, and then I can choose my focus mode. But when I moved over to the Z7, I really missed having the little button on the side of the D7500, which allows me to just press and just change the focus mode and focus area and things like that. It's really quick when you're using it, rather than having to go into the menu. This camera is also weather sealed, which is obviously really good. You can use it in all weathers if it's raining and things. It also has really good battery life. Again, I'm comparing this to my Nikon Z7, which is mirrorless. Mirrorless always use a lot more battery because it's having to use the kind of live view mode in the viewfinder. But even still, for a DSLR, this has still got really good battery life. Another thing I like about this camera is the connectivity. So it's got Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and you can use the SnapBridge app by Nikon on your smartphone to connect to the camera and see the live view mode on your phone. That's really useful if you haven't got a remote, because you can use your phone to see what your camera sees and take the shot without vibrating your camera too much. Or I used to use it when I was recording video with the camera. It's a kind of selfie mode. The camera doesn't have a fully articulated screen, so you can't flip that out and see yourself while you're recording. So it's quite useful to be able to connect to the camera, see yourself on the phone, and be able to press record. Okay then, let's talk about some of the things I don't like about the D7500. The first one is it doesn't have a joystick on the back to control where your focus point is on the screen or the viewfinder. That's not going to be an issue for some people. It depends on where you're coming from again. On your old camera, perhaps you didn't have a joystick. I'm coming from the point of view of having used the Z7, which does have the joystick, and I really like using that. On the D7500, you have to use the directional pad to move your focus point around, and that works fine, but it is quite a lot nicer to use the joystick, and I do miss that when I go back to using this camera. So the second thing is the pop-out screen. So it does have a pop-out screen, which is really great. It's one of the features I was looking for when I first got this camera, but it's not fully articulated, so it'll only kind of come out like this. It won't rotate left and right. So you can use the camera, if you're looking upwards, you can kind of bring it out like this, or if you're looking down, you can kind of bring it out like that, and that works great. But you can't use it in a selfie mode because it won't pop out to the side, and if you're at really low angles, sometimes you can't quite get it how you want it. And also if you're in portrait mode, you can't angle it up or down in portrait mode, so just bear that in mind. It's not a deal breaker, but there are times, rare times, when I do want to have that fully articulated screen. So I'm putting this one in the bad category, but it's really not bad. It's the focusing. So Nikon cameras have good focusing systems, but it's not quite as good as some of the other camera brands out there, so it's not going to keep up with the Canons and the Sonys. Having said that, if you're using this camera for, say, landscape or portraits or even wildlife to an extent, you're not even going to notice that. The focusing system is more than good enough for that kind of stuff. Where it might just let you down is if you're doing really fast action like sports, and also in live view mode. It uses a different focusing system compared to the one that you use for the viewfinder. So you'll be using the live view mode if you're doing video work, and the focusing there is not very sophisticated, and it also doesn't have a very good continuous autofocus. So if you're moving forward and backward within the frame, it's not going to track you as well as, say, the Sonys or Canon cameras. So something to bear in mind. I haven't really noticed focus problems that much with the work I do. If you are doing really fast action, perhaps consider one of the other camera brands. The last one I'm putting into the bad section, and it's not because of my experience of it, but because I've heard other people say this is an issue, it's not having dual card slots on the camera. So you've only got one card slot for one SD card in the D7500. For me, that's never been an issue. I've never had a card fail, and I don't do commercial work or weddings, that kind of thing, where I need the second card as a backup. And one last feature to talk about, which is neither really good nor bad, depending on your point of view, is the pop-up flash. So the D7500 does have a built-in pop-up flash. I never use it, so I'd just rather not have it, to be honest. It makes it a bit more weather sealed if it doesn't have it. But if you do use flash and you don't want to go and attach a separate flash, then you know, it's good for that. I'm going to head home now, and I'll do a little summary when I get back. See you there. So if you're thinking about getting the D7500, I hope this video has been useful. It certainly is a very good camera, even in 2021, and because it's been around for a while, you can get some really good deals as well. As I said before, it's just a really good all-rounder. It can do pretty much any type of photography fairly well. A lot of people get this camera because they want to do wildlife, because of the high burst rate. And it certainly works really well for that. If you're a beginner to mid-level user, you're going to get a lot of use out of this camera for wildlife or anything else. If you're more towards the advanced end of the scale or even pro, you're probably going to want to look at something like the D500 or a camera from one of the other manufacturers. But for most people, the D7500 is going to work brilliantly, so I can definitely recommend it there. I've just got a few more shots that I took today, as well as some of my favourite shots that I've taken with the D7500, so I'll put those on screen now. So thanks a lot for watching. That's it for this one. I don't always do gear reviews. I'm mostly out and about doing landscapes or wildlife, macro, that kind of thing. So why not subscribe, and you can keep up to date with what I'm doing every week. You can click the red button down here or on my face over here, and there's a new video every Sunday morning at 10 AM. So hopefully you'll catch me for the next one. Thanks a lot everyone, and bye for now.